Hey there, you beautiful souls. Welcome to the Authentic You podcast, where we dive deep into the power of authenticity and the journey to rediscovering your true self. I'm your host, Kristina Holle, and I'm beyond excited to embark on this transformative journey with you. Ever wonder how authenticity impacts relationship, career choices, and overall well-being? Well, wonder no more, because the Authentic You is your compass on this incredible adventure. So what can you expect from our show? Well, picture this: heart-to-heart conversation, inspiring stories, expert insights on the importance of authenticity. We're going to tackle the masks we wear, the societal expectations we navigate, and guide you back to the essence of who you truly are. The Authentic You podcast, where real stories meet real talk. Get ready to shine your light and live authentically. Who don't know me, my name is Kristina Holle. I'm the founder of the Authentic You Coaching. I help individuals, employees, entrepreneurs, organizations worldwide to connect with their higher side and lead a more productive and fulfilled life. I've been a corporate junkie for 25 years in senior HR leadership roles, and then I shifted. I wrote a book, which I believe was channeled, which now we're going to lean into more of the spiritual stuff. Wrote this book called The Authentic You, which changed my life completely. And when we listen to the call, we end up in situations like this right here, right now, talking about this. And what I learned when I went on my authentic journey is I'm quite intuitive, and I have these gifts that I am meant to share, but the gifts are really to help others learn about their own gifts so they can start to shine. Let's talk about intuition. And I want to talk about this because it's something deeply personal for me, yet it's a universal power that we all have. Intuition is that deeper knowing, that inner gut feel, the whisper of wisdom that's guiding you when your mind starts catching up. So think about those examples where you're like, oh, I really need to go here, or I have to do this, and you're kind of rushing because you're following the mind. But then you hear that sweet little whisper, like maybe you don't want to go down this path. Maybe you don't want to engage in that conversation with that person. That person doesn't feel right. Something's not quite right here. That is your intuition, my friends. And when we learn to listen and engage to it, it is going to be so powerful. You'll learn that you have avoided some sort of mishaps. And sometimes at that particular time, it can seem like, oh my gosh, why is there a roadblock here? And why can't I get here? But sometimes your intuition and this guidance on a higher level is helping you avoid really bad situations. So when we honor that our intuition is trying to speak to us and helping us slow down or maybe pivot, it's not just a fleeting thought. It's actually working in your best interest. It is a deeply ingrained intelligence that we need to honor and not dismiss. And when you do, I promise you, and I can't wait to hear all about it, I promise you, you will have incredible breakthroughs and success in your life. Because it's really learning how to trust it. And it's interesting, right? Because there's a stigma out there around intuition. There's some people that will be like, oh, that's just woo-woo. Woo-woo, astrology, all that stuff, that's nothing. Energy, that's not for me. But there's actually science behind it. Intuition can sometimes be dismissed as irrational or unreliable. But neuroscience actually shows that the brain processes information at the subconscious level before it reaches conscious awareness. So do you guys understand that? So when I say your subconscious level, that's kind of like when we're on autopilot. And what hangs out in our subconscious level, guys, is everything that has ever happened in our life. It is like this hidden tape recorder of all our hurts, all our happies, all the experiences. And what happens is that it's buried in this subconscious place. And our mind usually just operates from the conscious, right? Consciousness is like when we bring it to our attention and then we can understand. That's why a lot of the work that we do on my show is bringing things to consciousness, right? Bringing things to awareness, because then you can start to do something. So if there is a way that we are connecting with our subconscious before things are coming to consciousness, that's that inner feeling. That's that inner knowing, the one that knows our past experience, our emotions, our energies, the patterns. They help us inform our decisions. But then what happens is that our mind will try to logically explain them. And our mind may not be in alignment to intuition. Our mind might be like logically thinking, well, that's ridiculous. Why would I go to the grocery store at 7 when I could go at 10 a.m. and maximize my time? But something in you is saying, no, I'm not meant to go at that time. There's another reason why I'm supposed to be there. That's me speaking in being open. If I'm following flow of intuition, I'll be like, oh, well, I'm going to follow that little nudge to go to the grocery store at 7, let's say, because you don't know who's going to be there at 7. You don't know if there's going to be a connection or maybe some message, or it goes on and on. New doors could open up for you when you listen to your intuition. Your intuition, your inner compass will always put you on the best possible path. But we have not been very good at listening to it. Now, think about this, ladies and gents. If you're dating someone and something just doesn't feel right, it does not feel right about this person, and they're saying all the right things, and it seems like, hey, we're really having a good connection, but your gut, something in you is like, that person is not giving me the right vibe. I don't feel like I really can trust this person. But yet you don't listen and you keep going. I would say 99% of the time, it ends up being like, oh, I wish I would have listened. I knew that there was something off about that person. But maybe that person's super good looking, super successful, super looks like on the books, very amazing. But the reality, it's not a match. But if you listen to yourself and you trusted yourself on a deeper level, you would be very open to saying, either it's not the right time, something doesn't feel right, and trust yourself more to go with the direction that it doesn't feel right, rather than just jumping in and doing it because your mind's saying this is a perfect match for you. So I'll bring Steph up. I think that example is a really good example of listening to your intuition. Your intuition is really, really important, and it only gets better when you start trusting it. Steph, how are you today?
Yay! What a great topic.
This is a good one.
I think about this all the time. And if I can share also from growing up authoritarian, when you're taught that you can't trust your body.
Ooh, very true.
It was confusing when I started to learn that, because people kept saying, don't you trust yourself? Don't you I'm like, no, I have to go to my Bible and pray and ask God. And people are like,
right.
What? Don't you think you're an adult who can make your own decisions? What do you mean? And then I was like, oh, something's wrong with me. But then I realized, oh, I grew up this way and that's why I thought that. And that's, you know what I mean? People didn't get it if they didn't grow up that way. But I have oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I have an example.
Sure. Love it.
When I lived in Toronto, I met this guy. And I met him at church, as you do, I guess. And I thought he was very attractive. I was like, wow, blonde, blue eyes, kind of thing I always went for. And he was really smart. And so we started getting to know each other and we started talking. He did have a lot of mental health problems. And he wasn't always on his medications. But also over time, and at first it was like, I realized he was very similar to my dad. He was smart, but also talked down to me. So I was used to that. And that's why, of course, I was attracting that, because I was still living from that wound. But I knew, and then he would treat me like crap, and he'd break up with me and then come back. And then it was just awful. But I always knew something was wrong. And people kept telling me, Steph, this is not healthy. But do you know what? Because I believed, I had written down in my diary when I was 20 everything I was looking for in a guy, and it was certain theological viewpoints and this, and he was all of those. And I thought, this is of God. And growing up in a certain religious tradition, that's also, you believe it's God's will instead of your, like, even though I know something feels off, but this is God's will and he's meant to be my husband. After, it was just like the last time I saw him, I just was like, I got the ugh factor, like, ew. And then I realized I am so over it. And I'm so grateful for that, because I no longer desired him anymore. I was just like, oh, I get it. I'm done. And that's where I knew I was growing.
That literally that's a great point. That's a sign that you're growing, is that when it doesn't match anymore and you're like, ew, this isn't right.
Exactly. And your friends can tell you till they're blue in the face. Like, Stephanie, you deserve better. I didn't believe I deserved better. I thought I believed I deserved that. And that's why I get it. My friends are trying to help, but until you're ready to see it, there's nothing they can do.
It's so true. It's funny because I think I was the opposite. My intuition has been really developed, I think, at an early age. And I was dating a guy. Oh my gosh, he was like my friend. We played volleyball together. He was like 6'4". He started like really getting possessive and jealous and all this stuff.
Ooh.
And oh yeah. And my intuition was like, no, I don't think so. This does not feel right. You're out of here. And it took me 3 months though to do it. And I think I really lean into my intuition, because I could have been a different girl, where you easily could be in a situation like that for a year. But my intuition was so strong that I was like, that's a big no. You don't get to ask me where I've been, X, Y, and Z, or follow me and all that stuff. That's not fun.
That's amazing. And can I just say, when this bothers me, when they ask, why didn't she just leave? You don't know what she's dealing with. For many women, I know women who are raised strong and they're like, yeah, I tell them. And I was like, wow, I didn't know I could do that, because I was raised a certain way. And I was like, I have to be the good little girl and submissive and all that bullshit. Sorry, but not sorry. And I didn't know. And so when you start to love yourself, but you don't know if people say, why didn't you just leave?
I think that there's something to that too, because there's a whole theory, and we can talk about another chat, but about gaslighting and how people manipulate these wounds. And if you're not in a healthy place, you could easily make yourself pretty vulnerable, or you're like in doubt, right? So something might happen and then you start questioning it. You're like, oh, well, maybe that was me. Maybe I'm being a little bit too much, or maybe I'm this. And that's why the work of this, all the stuff that we're talking about, it's empowering you to trust yourself on a much deeper level.
What you're talking about is so great, because there's so many confusing things that happen. And especially, this gets really complicated, but when we go into, so I was raised to believe that women are emotional and men are rational. So I literally thought, I cannot be rational. I do not have critical thinking skills. That's men. And I'm just like, oh, I cry and I'm emotional. And that's just what women are. So of course, when you're told that, then you act more like that, because that's what you think you're supposed to be. The self-fulfilling prophecy. This is why, oh my goodness, can they put critical thinking in high school? Because
100%,
it took me to my 30s studying philosophy, where I took the course, and it was hard, the hardest, but the most wonderful course I ever took, because I was like, whoa, fallacies, what are these things? And I have a hard time actually naming them. I always have to Google straw man and all that, but my professor said, as long as you can tell when it's happening, that's the most important thing.
Yes.
And my father's great at this, where he will use a whole bunch of them all in a discussion, and you're confused. And I actually went to ChatGPT and I was like, okay, this is the argument. What fallacies were these? And there were like 5 different ones. And when they mix them all together, you get like, what just happened? And I don't know what to say. And that's where you just walk away because there's no point. But my dad did that my whole life. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's just angry and whatever. So I get it. But that's where you start to go. He'll use an example of a woman who was mean to him one time. Actually, he has a few, but and he'll, well, women do this. That's a human being being rude to another human being. I said, if it was a man, it would be rude too. And I always have to challenge him on that because he'll go back to, he's got some issue with women. I think my grandma, but anyway.
We're like, oh, honey, how you can see it now. You're like, oops.
She was an angry woman, so I get it. But I was like, oh, but grandma had her wounds too.
Right. So true.
And it was me and my sister and my mom and then my dad. So we were, I'm with females and I always get overrun by females. So it was like, we were always the stupid ones and he's the smart man. And recognizing that was like, whoa, realizing so much of what I thought about myself. But it's also interesting just to observe it now because I'm like, oh, that's interesting, right?
And it's like, we've talked about that, the generational, it's conditioning, right? These weird little stories, these beliefs that we've told ourselves and we pass them from generation to generation. And that's why understanding that there is another way and leaning in. I love that you are on this explore and you're like, hey, Dad, maybe that's grandma's thing, but we're not there yet. But we model the behavior. So the fact that you're planting the seeds, I think is fabulous.
Wayne Dyer, I always go back to Wayne Dyer's quote, the hardest person to love is your greatest teacher. And for me, that's my father.
That's a good one. It's so true. Well, it was funny because my dad showed up recently and it was over Christmas. I hadn't talked to him in a while and he's just like, yes. And I've healed from these things. And some of the things that I thought, Kristina, were just stupid. And I'm like, what is happening here? I'm like, what did you just say? And I'm like, be cool, Kristina. Don't overreact. And there's some conditioning there.
And I find putting that coach mentality instead of the daughter.
Yes.
It's helpful, right? Because it's observing instead of being like, oh, I'm triggered by my father. Because this is interesting. I'm going to use this as an experiment, right?
It actually teaches us to put the judgment aside because it doesn't serve anybody, really. Thank you, Steph. I really appreciate that. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're in front of someone else and you feel like you're being judged, it takes a certain person who's done the work and is evolved a little bit not to take it personally and understand that that's what that person's going through. But when you drop into neutral and you have these conversations with people without judgment, it's quite beautiful what actually ends up surfacing. You actually listen to each other and you hear each other. I know we have a practice in our family. We have a conversation, we call it the circle of truth. And at the cottage, the whole fam, if we have something that comes up, we all go to the dock. We sit, like there's 4 Muskoka chairs at the end of the dock on the water. And we all sit there. And everybody has to listen to each other. They don't get to speak when the other person speaks. They have to listen and then they can respond, but not from a defensive place. It's more like, thank you for sharing that. I've heard what you had to say. This is how I feel about it. See this. It is really amazing. That changed the dynamic completely. It's more about the collective, isn't it? Just on a smaller unit. Because you'd be very surprised what you hear. And this goes back to having those conversations without judgment or without the ego trying to win, how other people heard the same situation and how feelings got hurt. But when we had the circle of truth at the cottage, we moved past it pretty quickly. And it's great. And my husband will call on the circle of truth. My younger kids will call on the circle of truth. And it makes a big difference. Cicely, this is going to be a great topic because I'm talking about the fact that many of us out there, there's stigma around into your intuition. There's stigma around astrology. There's stigma around all these different practices to tap in, and they're quite necessary for us to use as tools to make sure that we're grounded. Like the stigma, ask yourself before you jump on the stigma train, where did the stigma come from? Just that's all I'm asking. Where did this thing come from? We can go deeper, but we won't necessarily in this moment. Cicely, what do you think?
One of the tactics of destroying a community is turning their sciences into things they use spiritually and scientifically in religion into savagery and saying that it's nonsense and then giving them something else to worship. So that's the reason that midwifery, medicine man, the healing of herbs has been demonized for so long, because it was taken and used as a, like, oh, this is savagery. You don't need this. Use this because this is your new God. And we have to look at these things from a historical standpoint.
You do.
Medicine men, astrologers were the speaker box for astronomers. They would calculate things in these complex mathematical sequences, and the astrologers were for the normal people that couldn't read. They would just interpret these things. And it's a really slippery slope when we talk about how intuition has been demonized, because it becomes woo-woo, blah, 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 all of these things. But in reality, it was the way that we tracked our animal migrations, our growing seasons, and when to plant. And one of the things, because people always ask me how I got into astrology. I got into astrology in college for agriculture, because the Farmer's Almanac was written through astrological dates.
I love it.
And it's like, oh, it's a pseudoscience. And I'm like, no, it's actually the accompaniment to the science that we need to feed people. It was made as a standard data collection system, because when people say they don't believe in astrology, I say good. It's not a belief system. It's data collection to help you work through whatever you're working through at the moment.
I love that, because people need to understand that. And the reason why I feel like intuition, I find it very triggery for me, because when people say intuition or astrology, you're not thinking the science behind it. The stigma makes you feel as though that you should be conducting spells in the forest. But here's the truth. We all have intuition, and intuition is your guiding compass. So why are we demonizing it? Astrology, I love that the link to the Farmer's Almanac, because it really is, that's fact there, instead of making it something that, oh, that doesn't make sense. There's a lot of stuff that makes sense here.
It does. And one of the things that really tickles me in the separation of human from intuition is making us believe that we are totally separate from nature, even though we have to breathe oxygen and eat things that come from the earth every day.
And what about our grounding practices when we're feeling, we have an uprise on an anxiety and mental health issues because people don't know how to take care of themselves. They're looking for more medication when you can actually go out in nature. Go out in nature, hug a tree. I know it sounds funny, but go hug a tree. Go barefoot on the grass, walk around. That will automatically get you in a grounded space. It extracts the erratic energy that's going on inside of you.
I never wear shoes unless I have to, and I'm always carrying around some form of rock.
And Cecily is a great person to have this conversation with me, because I know she understands it. We've had multiple conversations offline about it. But I carry two rocks too. I have one that is the quartz, that is the amplifier for when I bring in, because I bring in messages all the time. I'm so tapped in now. It's just the way it is. And then the other one is a grounding rock, because if you don't have that balance, if you don't know how to ground yourself, you're going to float away. just too much, right? There's a balance between both, but nature is a huge part of that.
Oh, yes. One of the stones that I keep with me most of the time in my car is a stone I found on a property that I was helping with a garden, and they had a little creek behind it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you see all of our technology," because it was a aquaponic setup where you're growing fish and food in water. And I was like, "Oh yeah, this is nice." And he's like, "Oh yeah, it's a creek behind the house." I'm like, "What?" So I'm walking all down by the creek, and I pick up a stone. He was like, "Oh, so you are having a good time and enjoying the technology and all this?" And I was like, "Yes, I found a rock." And he was like, "You are so simple." I was like, "Yeah."
That's all it needs to be, because I think it's getting more complicated. And that's why I think I was called to come on to have this conversation for whoever needs to hear it. With AI and the world getting faster and things moving quickly, do you know how to ground yourself when it gets a little bit too fast?
One of those things that it happens differently for everyone, because there was a big push for meditation, and it was in the marketed way. When I just want to tell people that meditation does not have to be you sitting there quietly, because two of my absolute favorite ways to tap into my intuition and get that energy moving and figure out what it is dancing and singing, because
That's great.
I have no thoughts when I sing and when I dance. I can continue on with the actions of the day, but I'm just moving and I'm singing.
I
And
love it.
I'm feeling connected to everything around me, and everyone can feel that energy, and it makes them feel better. And it's like, look at you being a beacon. Look at you with the
Right?
lamppost.
Look at you being a beacon. Nailed it. That's the whole point.
Because I'll get people to join in with me and everything. Like a couple of songs that I absolutely just love to use as grounding material. Shaka Khan, I Am Every Woman.
Ooh, I just heard that in my voice. Like, I'm every woman.
It's all in
Me.
Anything you wanna, baby, do it naturally. And
Oh,
yes, she has this part that reminds me of my intuition. I can sense your needs like rain onto the sea. I can make a rhyme or confusion in your mind. And I was like, yes, I can either be confusing people or assuring them that they can be grounded in my space. They hear my voice, they're like, "Oh, you have such a beautiful voice. Like, it's so calming." And I'm like, "Okay, the experiment is working. We
yes.
have found some energy to move around, because I don't know where
Yes.
people are coming from." And a lot of times I work late night. So I don't know where people are coming from, but I like to create a trauma informed space where they can kind of be, and they can be safe, and there's no noise outside of me singing and cooking. And it really works because people come back just to see me.
Yeah, of course. People like to be around people that are light. And when you're dancing around and you're higher energy, of course people are going to be attracted into that. You're going to bring Steph up. Hey, Steph, what are your thoughts?
I'm glad that you guys brought this up. I saw a post yesterday about meditation, and people were like, I find it hard to meditate. And somebody commented and they said, it doesn't mean you have to sit there, legs crossed. People find that hard. It's in whatever you find helpful. So there are times, like I do go for walks and I put my headphones on, listen to podcasts and Noon Vibe. But and I listen to my intuition. If I feel like, no, I don't feel like that today, then I go, no headphones. I'm just going for a walk. And I just be. And that's meditative. And like Sister was saying, singing and doing all these things, being creative, like all that stuff is meditation. The online space gets a little bit.
Yes, I know what you're going to say. Yep, go ahead.
I'm going to sell you meditation and yoga. And it's like, okay. And people have said, this is not working. I've met people who meditate and they're horrible people. And just the thing that they're told they have to do. And they're not learning to embody it and healing through it. And it's all this business online, which is why the online space can be, you feel like you're among all these people, but half of it's fake. You don't know what they're actually talking about.
I actually can't stand it, to be honest. It's like energetically, it feels like I just can feel it. Sometimes I wish I couldn't, but it's that fake, right? It's the, hey, look at me. I'm so perfect. I do meditations hours a day. And I do, it's just like, wow. Okay. Amazing. All I would say, 2 minutes every day of whatever that is, that's going to get you farther along than doing this. It's fake to me. It doesn't feel real, because if you're really in a spiritual practice, you don't need to showcase yourself like that. You just show up, right?
And it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
People, they're like, oh my God. Like, I remember trying to learn all this stuff, and now, because I see it all as tools, and I was like, oh, okay, that's a good way of looking at it. Because I'm like you, I'm like, oh yeah, post again. But also, there's more of a real and raw coming out. There's more of us who are just like, you know what, we're tired of this. I started learning personal growth. I was doing the same thing. I was posting gratitude, but I was trying. I was doing the thing, but I wasn't fully
embodying it.
So I was posting it, which is helpful to people, right? Yeah. But I also know where I was at, and I was just putting it out there because I was like, you got to do what I'm trying to do. Try to come from it from a more authentic place where it's like, I did a post where I said, guys, if you wake up, because I saw a post that said, when you wake up, be grateful. Not everyone, some people wake up in pain. Everyone is different. So we have to understand that that's a nice post, but not everyone can get there. And then people feel bad if you can't do that. So I said, you know what? It's fine. Like, if you can't do that, it's okay.
Well, and I think that's going back to it's enough. Like, just stop trying to fit a mold that may not be your mold to fit. Like, don't worry about it. But if you're interested in meditation, cool. Give it a try. You don't have to be that person. You got to be you doing meditation and whatever that may be.
Yeah, we're the mold. We're trying to fit, once again, a mold of what they're telling us we need. And while they're useful things that can be helpful, when we try to do it like what they're telling us to do, but it doesn't work for us, we have to find what works for us.
So important. And when you do, then it's not triggery. It doesn't matter anymore because you're doing you.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thanks, Steph. It actually frustrates me, as Steph said, sometimes when I see this stuff out there, I'm like, okay, you're talking about real trauma and transformation, but have you actually gone through that? You're working with people and you're kind of guiding. You want to make sure that the people that are giving you guidance have actually gone through stuff, right? It's not just because, hey, oh, I should be doing this, or this is the model of what's supposed to go out there. But this is where intuition can see. Now, you can take what you want from our conversations. I know that I'm called because I've tapped in. So what I literally do, guys, so when I come from a place of speaking, it's such a place of truth because I'm in it. Like, I've kind of through the other side. And when I say this intuition stuff, I have tapped in. I'm not trying to be someone else. I'm just trying to be me. And when we do that, that's the purity. So, we're here on a regular basis, it's probably because we're on a similar frequency. It makes sense. And then you're a part of layering on to the story that makes it so beautiful, because we don't need more of the same. We need you, just like we need me. Hey, how's it going, Cicely? This is awesome.
Going amazing, because you and Stephanie talked about something that really used to pick my brain so bad, and I got picked on and bullied for so bad. There's
funny.
this commodified version of gratitude that is just words. And my gratitude doesn't come through words. It comes through the feeling that is brought on by intuition. So sometimes I will have the feeling to pour out water over the ground and wash my hands in it, or alcohol. And I just say, thank you. I'm thankful for everything that is there. I'm thankful for everything that is done. I have these practices that are just deep down rooted somewhere. Nobody told me to do this. It was just, what do you do? How do you feel gratitude? What does it feel like? And I just pour out water and I wash my hands and I talk to the grass. I talk to the trees. And I got picked on so bad. They were like, she's a witch. Don't do anything with it. She's a witch. And I'm like, you told me to practice gratitude.
Yes.
I'm grateful for the earth that I'm standing on and the thousands of generations that came before me. I'm grateful for this water that has lived millions of lives. We're 70% water. And it was like, So there's such a demonization of any practice that hasn't been commodified.
Yeah. And it's based on fear, right? The demonization, the whole quotation, witch, fear, spirituality, anything, it's been told it's a bad thing. I don't understand how that possibly can be a bad thing. If you're tapped in and listening to your inner intuition, which is the language of your soul, how is that bad?
It's bad for the marketers because they can no longer sell you things that aren't attached to you. Keep you from the home of the body. If you're out of your body and just stuck in your mind, because Dr. Ra always talks about being in the mind. If you're out of your body and you're stuck in the mind, you're going to go to these sources for things and pay for it. And you're basically going to the god of money to get what you need instead of going to the universe, God, your body.
I think that's a really good point. So I want everyone to understand, whatever you want to call it, universe, God, spirit, higher power, we're all talking about the same thing. It's something bigger than us. It's linked in our being. The idea that you knew to just pour water on your hands just because you were following the feels of like, I'm supposed to do this. And it made sense.
Yeah. Intuition is a 187-year-old half native Black woman. She's quiet. She doesn't yell. Because that's the thing about intuition. Fear yells. Intuition is kind of quiet. My fear comes in, like, this is how I've determined the difference between fear and feeling. Is I feel like this because that separation is trying to put a fear-based narrative on what you feel. My intuition, that little old half native Black lady. It's never, I'm like, feel like this. And all I get is, you better act like you know. That quiet. And I'm like, well, that can't be what I think it is, and blah, blah, blah. Act like you got 3 eyes. Now, just don't use the 2. Use that one in the middle of your forehead. It's there for a reason. Yes, ma'am. And
Third
it's so
eye.
quiet.
Yep.
It's quiet. Like, see what that is. That's toxic, and you know toxic. Either you're going to deny your feeling and make yourself sick, or you're going to look at it for what it is and be quiet. Yes, ma'am. That's it. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. We talk about intuition a lot. Sometimes we don't understand there's different types of intuition. Like they're guiding, but there's different ways that we connect in. Right? I would say it's our magic. Like, so if we're tapping into intuition and we tap into this power that is like exceptional, it doesn't even exist yet, what you could bring into this planet. And it's about the collective and it's about the greater good. So if we're showing up that way, then something's going to change. If not, it's going to be more of the same. And we don't need more of the same. It's necessary, but I'm also a business person. So I was struggling in the beginning. I'm like, am I spiritual or am I business? The fact is I'm both. And that's what makes me very, very good at what I do. But when we stop trying to be one or the other, and we understand you just are, we're all different pieces of ourselves. And when we start to integrate, magic happens. Then you bring your specific magic. And it's kind of like the idea, you know how you can go to a hairdresser and you could say the same cut to the same person and it will have a different feel, vibe, whatever. You'll still get the cut. The experience will be a little bit different based on their particular magic. This is what this is like. Your intuition, how you tap in, you might tap in differently than I do. But for me, it's like I'm in full force, hitting source, and I get my hits all the time now because I trust it. I'm in a different space. But I think it's really important to understand that I'm not trying to do it like, I don't know, Deepak Chopra. Like I'm not, that kind of bothers me. I'm just doing me. And I see the magic that unfolds and it's necessary, just as it will be for you guys. Intuition isn't like a fun little party trick. Intuition is the guiding light to get you where you're supposed to be and to help you on the path to break patterns that you made commitments that you were going to do when you showed up on this planet. So we all had like little deals. So we were like, hey, I'm going to take that on. I'm going to take on crazy breakups and babies and do whatever it is. And because we signed up to learn.
Don't forget to follow us on social media for updates and behind the scene contents. And if you have any suggestions about future topics or guests, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, remember, stay curious, keep learning, and never stop exploring the fascinating world around you. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.